think we can both agree, Mowgli, that you are something the jungle has never seen before.
Hello everybody, Jim here. I just recently streamed Netflix new movie Mowgli, directed by Andy Serkis. This movie has had a production history going for quite a while now. It was greenlit around the same time as the 2016 Disney version, but eventually got pushed back in order to not compete with or be confused with that version. And unfortunately, because of all the confusion surrounding the movie, it was eventually sold off to Netflix, where it was originally going to be a wide theatrical release by Warner Brothers. So people's first experience with it will not be in a movie theater, mostly, but will be simply from streaming. So, one question that a lot of people have been asking is, why does this movie exist? Why do we need another version of The Jungle Book when we just got one from Disney that grossed nearly $1 billion, had a really good budget, was widely critically acclaimed, and yet here's a new version essentially telling the same story? The answer to that question is quite simple. The Disney version was mostly just a remake of the 1967 animated movie, and the 1967 animated movie was an adaptation of books from 1894 by Rudyard Kipling, and that adaptation was very, very far from faithful. The books had very dark themes. They were written in very old English that's very hard for modern audiences to understand, and Disney obviously went in a very different direction, making a more mainstream family picture out of it. The main point of this version was to, for the first time really as a big screen movie, to give us a very faithful adaptation of Rudyard Kipling's books.
Until one day, I just stopped. And I gained their trust. Little brother.
Which is really something we've never really had before in a big budget movie. There was a one from the 90s that put the author's name in the title, and yet it was actually less faithful than the original animated movie, so why they put the author's name in the title, got no fucking clue. This version, which is just called Mowgli, not a jungle, both to distinguish it from the Disney version, but more than that, the books were actually a series of short stories, most of which actually didn't involve Mowgli at all. So really calling it a jungle book is a little inaccurate if you're just telling Mowgli's story. So calling this movie just Mowgli, or I think Legend of the Jungle is what Netflix has rebranded it, but the title screen in the movie is just Mowgli, which is what I will refer to the movie as, is actually much more accurate. And this movie is most notably different from the Disney version for several reasons. One, there are no songs. Two, King Louie's absent, because that's a Disney character who was never in the original story. More than that, this is much, much darker and much more violent than the Disney version. This is a Jungle Book movie for adults, or maybe older kids can handle it, but this is definitely not one for the little kids. Show any little ones you have the Disney version and save this version for when they're older, because this version gets really, really intense at times.
How you've grown.
Like in the Disney version, banter between Bagheera and Baloo would be like, "Oh, Baloo, you are such a slob, you're so irresponsible." And he'd be like, "Bagheera, what's wrong, man? God, quit being a stick in the mud." Here it's, "What'd you fucking say, Baloo?" Pretty much. It's a lot more gritty and intense. The animation is done primarily with motion capture, and there was an effort to kind of put the essence of the actors into the computer animated characters, whereas the recent Disney version just tried to make them look like real animals. This movie tried to more anthropomorphize them so that the actors' mannerisms and performance would really come through in the character. I wouldn't really say either method is superior per se, just different. Though the overall animation in this one is a bit behind the Disney version, but only a bit. It's still generally very, very good. I'm guessing this version probably had a smaller budget than the Disney version from 2.5 years ago, and that's fine. Like, if this had come out like 4 or 5 years ago, it would have been state-of-the-art, so it was more than good enough. I read a lot of the reviews, and a lot of them were attacking it because it was too dark for kids, and they didn't seem to realize that that's the entire reason why this version exists. It was meant to rescue a more dark and mature story from the kind of whitewashing and mainstreaming that the Walt Disney Corporation seems to do to all these stories. If you ever went back to like the original fairy tales, they were a lot darker and more messed up. This is one that goes back to the original story and tries to be true to that aspect. And then not that there aren't changes in this version as well. There are some things that are different. One character, what was it, I forgot how to pronounce his name, was changed, for example, from a jackal to a hyena. Shere Khan was involved with monkey people taking Mowgli, which he wasn't either in the Disney version or the book. That actually might be one of the only areas where the Disney version was a bit more faithful, but this kind of just goes back, but it does go back to that story, and it's much, much closer. And I really enjoyed this one, but there were some definite problems with it, and the main issue with it was its pacing. Basically, this movie feels truculate. It feels rushed, particularly in its last half hour. It feels like it really is rushing through the story, whereas if it had given a bit more time, if it had really fleshed out Mowgli's adapting in the Man Village a bit more, I feel like this would have been a stronger picture, but it feels like it's just eager to get to the end conflict, and it ends on a bit anticlimactic. Like, it doesn't feel fully like it delivers what it was building up to. And which is kind of a shame. Like, with a little more fleshing out, really could have been a lot better. I don't know if that was because of budget cuts or maybe Circus just doesn't really know quite how to pace his movies that well. The positives far outweigh the negatives, though. All the performances are excellent. The kid who plays Mowgli does an excellent job. Definitely better than the kid in the Disney version. His performance really is very intense at times. And he really makes you feel for this character and what he's going through, being torn between two worlds. And all the motion capture voice performances by Christian Bale, Andy Serkis, Cate Blanchett's as Kaa was really, really awesome. Definitely the best version of Kaa ever.
Let the man come alone. He belongs to us.
Where Scarlett Johansson's Kaa was interesting for her bit part, this version feels more mysterious and really had a really powerful presence anytime she was on screen. Absolutely loved the portrayal. So if you got a Netflix account, you absolutely should stream this movie. This was a movie that really feels like it's a passion project. While Andy Serkis didn't deliver a perfect movie, he did make this purely out of passion for the original story, and I really look forward to his upcoming adaptation of Animal Farm. I'm really hoping he brings the same passion to it. Whereas so many movies, hate to say it's only the Walt Disney Corporation, but they're probably the biggest offender in this regard, just seem very sanctified to appeal to a wide demographic. This one feels like it was made by someone who really wanted to capture the heart of a classic story. And for that, Mowgli is a movie that everyone should see. I don't know if it was one of the best movies this year. It's kind of up there, I'd say. But it's still one that's easily worth checking out. So check out Mowgli on Netflix.